In southern New York's secluded corners lies where I have served as a dedicated, law enforcement officer since a young age of 23 years old. The area under my patrol does not often witness high levels of criminal activity, drawing attention for most days occupied with managing local disturbances or occasional petty thefts instead. Major incidents emerge rarely, like observing a blue moon in broad daylight, due to their infrequency here. Throughout varying shifts experienced during my service tenure thus far, the unique aspects and expectations mark each one distinctively. My memory remains haunted by a particular night during the nocturnal watch. Amid carrying out this specific assignment, I recall navigating along an isolated road confined within dense woods on either side. The surroundings offered no respite from darkness, as an absence of streetlights penetrated this surreal world. An unexpected flicker of red taillights abruptly captured my focus to the right side of the roadway ahead. Progressive proximity revealed that the driver's door stood partially open, signaling a situation possibly warranting further assistance or attention addressed towards whoever might find themselves stranded. However, before there was any time for me to proactively assist or understand their circumstances more fully unfolding, a shadowy figure swiftly emerged from inside the vehicle, only to disappear into the densely wooded area beyond immediately. Reacting promptly to such suspicious activity, witnessed firsthand prompted transmission of critical information over radio channels, serving as valuable backup. While cautiously veering onto nearby grassy terrain, a strategic decision made in preparation for immediate emergency response requirements. Instinctively, with my flashlight casting its beam deep into surrounding depths and mindful safeguards maintained, including hand-placed vigilantly on holstered weapon, I ventured out of my securely fortified cruiser onto uncertain ground. Step-by-step advances toward abandoned car continue, bathed in focused illumination offered by constant stream of light, originating from flashlight base, serving dual functional purposes, both searching and illuminating known parameters thoroughly. Upon closer inspection and reaching anticipated destination, inner thoughts momentarily expected another occupant within vehicle limits. Locating, no such personnel existed. Through interior spaces entirely vacated but for one unmistakable component, an overpowering stench reminiscent of decomposing flora. My intuition warned me that the situation was growing increasingly complicated. Returning to the abandoned vehicle, I noticed it lacked any license plates. As I delved further into my examination, I made a stomach-turning discovery: a heavy object concealed in bloodied paper towels. Gathering my courage, I cautiously unwrapped it, only to be horrified by the sight of a severed hand drenched in crimson. Swiftly informing my colleagues through the radio, I revealed that we might be dealing with a potential murder scenario. Urgently activating my cruiser's lights to call for additional officers, we embarked on an intensive search of the surrounding woods, but failed to find any traces of blood or footprints. Even with the later arrival of K9 units, summoned for assistance, no evidence pointing towards the mysterious figure could be uncovered. The vehicle was seized, and subsequent investigation revealed that it had been reported stolen by someone local. DNA testing was conducted on the blood-soaked hand and fingerprints were lifted from the steering wheel, however no matches were found in our database. To this day, this bewildering case remains cloaked in uncertainty as we continue to grapple with questions regarding both the identity of the car's driver and ownership of the severed hand. As enforcers of the law in the Sheriff's Department, my colleague and I are assigned to supervise offenders who wear tethers or ankle monitors. One eerie evening, we were tracking down a woman who had escaped the confines of the program. Our search led us to an ominous neighborhood, where even the shadows seemed to hold secrets. Most stops were mundane in our line of work, but this one sent chills down our spine right from the start. My partner headed for the front entrance of the suspicious house while I held my position at the side, keeping my gaze alternating between him and the eerie side facade of the dwelling. As we announced our presence, we discerned stirring noises from within. When the door finally cracked open, an older woman peeked out, her eyes landing directly on me. It was bizarre. She couldn't have spotted me, as I was concealed from the windows at the front and side of the house. And yet, her gaze found me first before addressing my partner at the front door. After a moment of unsettling silence, she admitted us into the premises upon our query regarding the absconding woman, Sarah. As if prompted by our question, she let out an unintelligible murmur that hinted at Sarah's presence. Suddenly, she plunged onto all fours, scurrying around and hollering for Sarah. It became evident that she had some cognitive impairments, and we surmised that Sarah was her caregiver. Though the situation took a strange turn, we began our search. As we scoured the home, the woman kept trailing us on all fours, her cries for Sarah echoing through the eerie quiet. Despite it being past 8 p.m., only a solitary lamp cast its feeble glow around the house. A peculiar energy hung in the air. The peculiar floor plan of the older style house seemed to defy logic. Every time I exited a room, I felt disoriented, as if I had teleported to a different part of the house. Even more disturbing was the woman's uncanny ability to suddenly appear right behind me without making a sound. My reality seemed to warp, stirring an unease within me. At one point, we found our way to the upper level. What we expected to be an array of bedrooms and possibly a bathroom turned out to be a sealed door. After some struggle, we managed to pry it open, only to reveal an attic. The scene bore an eerie resemblance to a chilling moment from Paranormal Activity, where the protagonist uncovers a hidden picture in the insulation. Amid the clutter and insulation, there hung an old-fashioned light bulb, its pull cord swinging lightly. All this while, the woman sat at the foot of the stairs, intermittently calling for Sarah. The scene bore an eerie resemblance to a chilling moment from Paranormal Activity, where the protagonist uncovers a hidden picture in the insulation. Amid the clutter and insulation, there hung an old-fashioned light bulb, its pull cord swinging lightly. All this while, the woman sat at the foot of the stairs, intermittently calling for Sarah. After what felt like an hour of futile searching, wandering in and out of rooms that felt like a maze, we decided to leave. The woman, who had spent the entire ordeal crawling, was now standing erect, her unsettling gaze following us as we drove away. According to our dispatch time and clearing time, we had only spent 20 minutes at the house, yet it felt like a couple of hours. The memory of the night, the woman's eerie behavior, the disorienting layout of the house, and her intense gaze as we departed has lingered with us. To date, we haven't set foot in that house again. Residing amidst the serene heartland of Georgia, my family and I cherished the tranquility of our locale, cherishing the absence of sensational news that often plagues busier regions. A close cousin, whom we affectionately referred to as Rob, was an enthusiastic addition to the police force half a decade ago. Inspired by a noble aspiration to enrich the community's well-being, he stepped into the profession with high hopes. One day, an alarming signal emerged from an assumedly deserted residence, nestled between the towns of Macon and Roberta. The decrepit condition of the dwelling suggested its long-standing abandonment. Upon their arrival, they discovered an elderly man, perched on the doorstep, his hands cradled within his pockets. The sight of the tear-streaked man, reduced to a sobbing mess, was unsettling. His murmurs alluded to an unspeakable horror that seemed to have shattered his sanity. Despite their efforts, the traumatized man's incoherence made questioning him futile. His partner radioed for additional units while Rob, armed and on high alert, decided to investigate the interior of the residence. As he stepped into the home, a nauseating stench engulfed him. The sight that met his eyes was one of sheer chaos. The house was a monument to severe hoarding. The kitchen and living area were littered with stacked utensils and rotting food. Despite the revulsion gnawing at him, Rob adhered to protocol, announcing his presence. The response was a chilling silence. As he tread carefully down the hallway, the putrid aroma intensified, indicating a more disturbing discovery ahead. Overwhelmed by the stench, Rob held his breath as he pushed open the door to what appeared to be a bedroom. Inside lay two lifeless bodies, their ashen skin crawling with flies. The grotesque sight was enough to test the firmest of stomachs. Yet, driven by duty, Rob decided to inspect the corpses closely, a choice he has regretted ever since. The decayed bodies belonged to a man and a woman, their features distorted by decomposition, their mouths serving as gruesome hubs for the buzzing flies. As he examined the female corpse, Rob made a discovery that shattered his composure. She was clutching a tiny lifeless body, an infant. The sight of a cockroach crawling out of the infant's mouth was the final straw, pushing him to rush out of the house, collapsing outside, his lunch regurgitating onto the steps. Once reinforcements arrived, a detailed examination ensued. The distraught man they had encountered was revealed to be an old colleague and friend of the deceased male. They were both employees at a peach packing plant. Concerned over his friend's unexplained absence, the man had decided to visit, unwittingly walking into a nightmarish scene. As per the investigators' findings, the deceased couple had spiraled into a pit of opioid addiction following a medical procedure. Their shared dependency on painkillers escalated into heroin abuse. Their young daughter, barely a few years old, had perished due to severe neglect. Upon discovering their child's demise, the couple had succumbed to despair, leading to a fatal overdose. Autopsy reports revealed lethal quantities of heroin in their systems. Despite the horrific experience, Rob continues to serve as a law enforcement officer. However, the traumatic incident left him grappling with alcohol dependence. Thanks to regular therapy, he managed to control his drinking habit, but the harrowing image of the infant's lifeless body continues to haunt his dreams. In his nightmares, the baby's cries still echo, serving as a grim reminder of the horrifying encounter. There was an instance when I was summoned to investigate a probable case of unauthorized entry. A single, young lady residing by herself had reported, in a voice filled with fright, that upon returning home, she discovered a shattered window on the ground floor. Oddly enough, nothing seemed to be missing, and there was no trace of any intruder. Yet, when she ascended to her bedroom, she was certain she could hear someone moving around the lower floor. Suddenly, our phone connection was severed, and despite multiple attempts to reconnect, there was no response from her end. Taking up the case, I made my way to her petite residence. After reaching, I knocked on the front door and waited. When there was no response, I knocked again and pressed the doorbell. With continued silence, I decided to take a look around the property. I found the broken window, large enough for an intruder to slip through effortlessly. Peering into the darkened house, I identified myself as law enforcement, but was met with stillness. After notifying the dispatch about the situation and the arrival of more officers, I decided not to linger outside. Announcing my intent to enter, I carefully made my way through the shattered window. Stepping on shards of glass, I ventured through the kitchen, my firearm at the ready. Making my presence known, I called out into the house. Hearing no response, I headed upstairs, considering that the young woman had reported noises emanating from downstairs. As I navigated the staircase, I made sure to balance between being stealthy and noisy. Upon reaching the top, I called out again, this time hearing a faint, feminine response. Tracing the voice, I found the young woman sitting upright in her bed, shrouded by her bedding. As I questioned her well-being, I detected a quiver in her reply. Even though the room was lit only by the moonlight, I could clearly see the distress on her face. After reassuring her that I was responding to her initial call, I inquired about the severed phone call and the lack of response thereafter. She stammered, claiming that she was alone. Grasping the situation, I pointed towards the closet, to which she subtly shook her head. When I indicated towards the area under the bed, I received a slight nod. Suddenly, the gravity of the situation seemed overwhelming. Deciding on a course of action, I asked her to sign a form, stating the normality of the situation. As she complied, I guided her out of the room. Once she was safe, I drew my weapon, and demanded the intruder to reveal himself. I was genuinely taken aback as a dark figure emerged from under the bed. Ordering him to drop any weapons, I heard the thud of a firearm hitting the floor. The intruder, a man in his middle ages, dressed completely in black, was swiftly apprehended. Just as I was escorting him outside, additional officers arrived. As it turned out, the woman had intentionally disconnected the call, fearing the intruder would hear the ongoing conversation. She also refrained from picking up the phone for the same reason. The intruder had threatened her life, instructing her to maintain the illusion of normality, while he hid under the bed. In retrospect, I am relieved that I was able to comprehend the situation. Things could have easily escalated into something much worse.